A single flower bulb, sold for the price of a mansion. February 3rd, 1637, Amsterdam. A tulip bulb called Semper Augustus, just sold for 10,000 guilders, enough to buy a luxury canal house in the city's most prestigious district. The buyer? A man who'd never even seen the flower bloom. Forget Bitcoin. Forget the dot-com bubble. This is the story of humanity's first financial mania, and it happened 400 years ago with a flower that couldn't even be eaten. This is the Capital Files, and today we're opening the classified files on the world's first crypto bubble. Picture this. It's 1630, and the Dutch Republic is the richest place on earth. Amsterdam's merchants control global trade routes from Asia to the Americas. Money is flowing like water through the canals, and the newly wealthy Dutch are hungry for one thing: status symbols. Tulips weren't native to Holland. They came from the Ottoman Empire, brought by a botanist named Carolus Clesius around 1593. To the Dutch, these flowers were exotic, rare, and most importantly, expensive. Perfect for showing off your wealth. But here's where it gets interesting. The most valuable tulips weren't the pretty, uniform ones. The most prized tulips were infected with a virus, the mosaic virus, that created stunning, irregular patterns of color. The Dutch called them broken tulips, and they drove people absolutely insane with desire. By 1634, tulip trading had moved beyond gardeners and botanists. Merchants, blacksmiths, weavers, even servants were buying and selling tulip bulbs, like we trade stocks today. And just like today's crypto traders, most of them had never actually seen the product they were trading. Here's the kicker. Tulips only bloom for about a week each year, and bulbs can only be planted in specific seasons. So what were people actually trading? Promises, contracts, future delivery of bulbs that might not even exist yet. Sound familiar? Three powerful psychological forces were driving this madness. Fear of missing out. Your neighbor just made a fortune selling one bulb. Your colleague quit his job to become a full-time tulip trader. Everyone around you is getting rich, and you're not. Social status. In a society obsessed with appearances, owning rare tulips became the ultimate flex. It wasn't about the flower, it was about what the flower said about you. Easy money illusion. When prices only go up, everyone feels like a genius. The shoemaker who made 1,000% profit in 3 months wasn't lucky. He was a visionary trader, right? By 1636, a single bulb could cost more than a skilled craftsman made in an entire decade. Let me put this madness in perspective. In 1637, these were actual recorded prices. 1 Viceroy tulip bulb, 2,500 guilders. 1 Admiral van der Eyck, 1,620 guilders. 1 Semper Augustus, 10,000 guilders. What could 10,000 guilders buy you? A luxury canal house in Amsterdam, or 8 fat pigs, or 1,000 pounds of cheese, or 4 tons of beer. One family famously traded their entire brewery for 3 tulip bulbs. The real action happened in Amsterdam's taverns and coffee houses, where makeshift tulip exchanges operated like modern trading floors. Men would gather around wooden tables, shouting prices, making deals with handshakes, trading bulbs they'd never seen for money they didn't have. The most famous was the Groot Zaal Tavern, where traders developed an early form of futures contracts. You could buy a tulip bulb in winter for delivery in spring, basically betting on future flower prices. One trader, Jan van Goghen, not the painter, but just as delusional, bought tulip futures worth 27,000 guilders. His annual income? 200 guilders. He was leveraged 135 to 1. Sound like any modern investment strategies, you know. Adrian Pauw, a wealthy merchant, traded his entire art collection, including works by Rembrandt, for a single Admiral van der Eyck bulb. Peter Wijnants, a weaver from Haarlem, sold his house, his workshop, and his wife's jewelry to buy 12 tulip bulbs. His plan? Flip them in 3 months and buy 2 houses. Sarah de Heer, a tavern keeper's wife, convinced her husband to mortgage their business to invest in tulips. "Everyone's doing it," she said. "How can we lose?" These weren't just numbers on a ledger. These were real people making life-changing bets on flowers. By late 1636, the warning signs were everywhere, but greed had made everyone blind. Tulip bulbs were being sold by weight rather than by individual quality. People were buying bulbs that were actually just IOUs. Professional gardeners started warning that the prices made no biological sense. The Dutch government began investigating the tulip trade for potential regulation. But like every bubble in history, the believers had an answer for every skeptic. This time is different. February 3rd, 1637. Haarlem. A routine tulip auction that would change everything. The auctioneer held up a pound of white Kronen bulbs, nothing fancy, just ordinary tulips. The bidding started at 1,250 guilders per pound. Then silence. No bids. No hands raised. No one wanted to pay yesterday's price for today's tulips. Word spread like wildfire through the Dutch Republic. The tulip market had collapsed. Within days, panic selling swept through Holland. Traders who had borrowed money to buy tulips at peak prices were suddenly holding worthless contracts. The white Kronen tulip bulbs that couldn't find buyers at 1,250 guilders were soon being offered for 50 guilders, then 20, then 5. Remember Peter Wijnants, the weaver who sold everything for 12 tulip bulbs? Those bulbs, purchased for 5,000 guilders, were now worth less than 50 guilders. He lost his house, his business, and his marriage. Here's where it gets really messy. Most tulip trades were gentlemen's agreements, handshake deals in taverns. When buyers refused to honor their contracts, sellers took them to court. But the courts were overwhelmed and ultimately declared most tulip contracts null and void. Thousands of contracts worth millions of guilders simply disappeared. Sarah de Heer, the tavern keeper's wife, found herself holding worthless paper while still owing money to creditors. The family business was seized, and she spent the rest of her life in poverty. The economic damage was devastating but localized. Unlike modern financial crises, the Tulip Mania didn't bring down banks or crash the entire Dutch economy. Why? Because it was essentially a side bet by the middle class, not a systemic risk to core financial institutions. But the psychological damage was profound. An entire generation learned a brutal lesson about the difference between price and value, between speculation and investment. Here's what the Tulip Mania really teaches us. Human nature doesn't change. The same psychological forces that drove Dutch merchants to trade their breweries for flower bulbs are the exact same forces driving modern financial manias. FOMO, fear of missing out on the next big thing. Social proof. If everyone else is doing it, it must be smart. Recency bias. Recent gains predict future gains. Overconfidence. Early success breeds dangerous assumptions. The Tulip Mania wasn't the last time humans lost their minds over a speculative asset. 1999. .com stocks with no revenue trading at 100x sales. 2008. Subprime mortgages packaged as safe investments. 2017. Crypto tokens with names like Dogecoin hitting billion-dollar valuations. 2021. NFT JPEGs selling for 6 figures. Each generation thinks it's different. Each generation discovers it's not. The most uncomfortable truth about the Tulip Mania is this: it wasn't irrational until it was. Early tulip investors made real money. The flower market had genuine growth potential. The first speculators were right, until they weren't. The problem wasn't the tulips. The problem was the moment when asset prices detached completely from asset values. When a flower bulb cost more than a house, the market had stopped pricing tulips and started pricing dreams. So here is the question that should keep every investor awake at night. When you're trading Bitcoin at $60,000, or buying a stock at 50x revenue, or bidding on an EV, are you buying an asset, or are you buying a dream? History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. The next bubble won't be tulips, it'll be something we can't even imagine yet. But the psychology will be identical. Smart people making rational decisions that collectively create irrational outcomes. Because in the end, we're all still human. We're all still susceptible to the same fears, the same greed, the same delusions that convinced rational Dutch merchants to trade everything they owned for flowers. The tulips are gone, but the madness remains. The files on humanity's first financial bubble reveal an uncomfortable truth. We haven't learned as much as we think we have. 400 years later, we're still trading our futures for flowers. We just call them by different names. This has been the Capital Files. If this deep dive into humanity's oldest financial folly opened your eyes to the patterns that never change, hit that like button. Subscribe to the Capital Files for more untold stories from financial history. And tell us in the comments, what's today's version of Tulip Mania? What bubble do you think we're living in right now?